All right, what we're going to be taking a look at this week is finding solutions for quadratic equations using the quadratic formula. The quadratic formula is represented by the equation x equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac over or divided by 2a. There's three things we got to know about it before we can move forward. One, we have to start in standard form. So it has to be ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. This is really important. We'll talk about why this is important here in a little bit as well. Once we know that it starts in standard form, we can then identify a, b, and c. A is what's in front of your x squared, b is what's in front of your x, and c is the constant that's all by itself. And then 3, the plus or minus, right, here in this equation, the plus or minus means that there could be two possible answers. You could only have one, you could have 0. We'll talk about those examples here in just a second as well. If there is a negative, it carries with the A, B, or C, and we'll show some examples of that here in a second too. So why would you want to use quadratic formula? It always works. I can use it for any problem and find a solution. Sometimes factoring is faster, or if it's in root form, doing it that way is faster. But no matter what, quadratic formula is always going to work. Okay, so the steps for using the quadratic formula. First, it has to be in standard form. F of x equals ax squared plus bx plus c is what we talked about just a second ago. Now, if it says f of x, what that really means is 0. So if it has that in the problem, like on step 2 here, it's going to be f of x equals 0. So it's going to be ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. Once it is equal to 0, that then allows me to properly identify my a, b, and c values. So we can identify a, b, and c. That's step 3. And then once you do that, step 4 is going to be to plug that in to the quadratic formula. So we're going to take those values and just simply plug them in. Anywhere there's a b, you put the b. If there's an a, you put the a. If there's a c, you put whatever the c value was. Step 5 is to simplify. Then solve out the problem. Multiply it out and figure out what our two solutions could be. Okay, first thing we're going to look at is just setting it up. So if they give you these functions, what does it look like when I plug that in? You've got 3x squared plus 2x plus 7 equals 0. So we need to identify our a, our b, and our c. Okay, a is what's in front of the x squared, so a is going to be 3. B is what's in front of the x, so b is going to be 2. And c is a constant, it's going to be 7. Okay, so because we always have our quadratic formula given to us, even if we don't memorize it, it will always be on a sheet for us to look at. I'm looking for negative b, so whatever my b value is, but negative. So my b value is 2, so my problem needs to start with negative 2. A does not start with negative 2, and neither does c, so those are automatically out. Now both b and d both start with negative 2, so I can move on to the next part. Plus or minus the square root of b squared. Okay, so b is 2, so I need to look out for 2 squared. This answer has 3 squared. 3 is our a value, so it can't be b, so it's got to be d. Okay, pretty straightforward. We can do the same thing on the second one. Okay, my a value is 2. My b value in this case is negative 8 because it's minus 8x. Our b value is going to be negative 8. Our c value is going to be 3. Okay, so to get us started, I'm looking for negative b. Now, negative 8, because it's a double negative, ends up being positive. So I'm looking for a positive 8 to start our equation. Nope, not going to be a, and it's not going to be d. So we're down to b and c, which both start with positive 8. So then I got to look at plus or minus the square root of b squared. Now my b is still negative 8, so I'm looking for a negative 8 squared. The only one that has that would be b, so c is automatically out. Okay, and then on our final one, we've got a is equal to 2, b is equal to negative 10, and c is equal to also negative 10. Okay, if I'm looking at these problems, I'm looking for negative negative 10, which would give me a positive 10. So I'm looking for the equation that starts with positive 10. It's not going to be A because it starts with 2, and it's not going to be D because it starts with 2. Then I'm left with C and D, and the only difference there, just like the first two, is I look at plus or minus the square root of B squared. So my B value is negative 10. Looking for negative 10 squared, which would be B. Okay, on this one, so let's solve it out. Let's find our two solutions. On this problem, because it's f of x, remember we just replaced that with 0. So we really have 0 equals x squared minus 5x minus 6. That means my a value is what's in front of the x squared. Since there's no visible coefficient, right, we treat it as a invisible 1. So my a value is 1. My b value is what's in front of the x, so it's negative 5. And your c value is your constant is negative 6. Okay, so I go ahead and I plug all those in, right, into my formula. Negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. So negative b, so negative 5, okay, which ends up being positive 5. Plus or minus the square root of negative 5 squared minus 4 times a, which is 1, times c, which is negative 6, all over 2 times a. You can type this entire part in to your calculator, right? Whether that's Desmos, you have your own, you type that in. Negative 5 ends up being positive 5. Okay, if we do end up typing this out, right? Negative 5 squared is 25. Negative 4 times negative 6 is positive 24. So 25 plus 24 is 49. So I really have 5 plus or minus the square root of 49 over 2 times 1, which is 2. Now, the square root of 49 is 7. So we have 5 plus or minus 7 divided by 2. So that's where we get our two equations. One that is 5 plus 7 divided by 2, and one that is 5 minus 7 divided by 2. So that's where I have my two solutions. The plus or minus means I'm going to have two different answers. 5 plus 7 is 12. 12 divided by 2 is 6. Right? So that's the first answer. 5 minus 7 is negative 2. Divided by 2 is negative 1. So my two answers are x equals 6 and x equals negative 1. You can also write it out just like this here as well. Okay. Looking here, okay, we want to solve this by using the quadratic formula. Okay, it's already equal to 0. So I need to find my a, b, and c values. My a value is what's in front of the x squared. So a is going to equal 9. My b value is what's in front of the x. Now, if you look here, I don't have an x, which means my b value is 0. Okay? And then my c value is negative 1. Okay, so let's go ahead and let's plug that into the quadratic formula. So negative b, so negative 0, plus or minus the square root of 0 squared minus x to negative b plus or minus square root of b squared minus 4 times a, which is 9, times c, which is negative 1, over 2 times 9. Okay, so this ends up being 0, right? This ends up being negative 4 times 9 is negative 36 times negative 1 is positive 36. So we've got negative 0, which is just 0, right? That goes away. Plus or minus the square root of 36 divided by 2 times 9 is 18. Okay, then we're going to take 0 plus or minus the square root of 36. So since the square root of 36 is 6, 0 plus 6 divided by 18, and 0 minus 6 divided by 18. Gives me positive 6 over 18 and negative 6 over 18. We can simplify both of these to be 1/3 and negative 1/3. So in this case, our answer would be this plus or minus 1/3. And that wraps it up for solving using the quadratic formula. If you have any questions, feel free to email your teacher. Let us know. We'd love to help you guys out. But other than that, hope you guys have a wonderful week. And if you need any other video help with this, I know we're going to attach a few other videos as well as a way to memorize quadratic formula. If you need that, email your teachers, and hope you all have a great week.